Okay.
Recording in progress.
Yours does it automatic.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying. I set it to that way for one time and then I never changed it.
That's fair.
So even the most personal meetings, I'm like, hold a second.
It's like, hold on, this is recording.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's better than expecting it to record in it.
Nice.
Nice. I'm on the record.
You're on
in
the record.
Both places.
Okay.
This is getting intimidating.
Sarah,
Yes.
state your name and your occupation.
Okay. Sarah Robbins, and I am a professor, but I do 3D digital design. I'm a video games artist and also a dice maker.
Oh, a dice maker.
Yeah.
Can you pull one up and show it to the
I
people?
don't have any with me. I'm sorry.
This looks like a little person in the background.
But it's not. It's just my robes.
That's what she says. Okay, so this is for media and careers. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you got into the career you're in now?
Ooh, okay. So for me, it was a little bit of a wild journey to get there. So in my undergrad, I actually trained to be an animator for film. I'm gonna look at you because it's way less awkward.
Like instead of looking at your own reflection.
I'm trying to look up into the distance into space.
Let's back it up so it feels natural.
There we go. We should have done this first, but it's fine.
It's all right.
Okay, I'm gonna look at you. This is way better. Okay, so don't smile at me that way. We're getting that. So okay. There we go. Starting again. You can cut all of that out in post. Okay. So for me, it was kind of weird. So in my undergrad, I actually trained in animation and visual effects, but I trained for film. And so I spent 4 years training along that path and got to the end and realized that I didn't really want to do film, which I thought I did at the beginning, but I realized I wanted to do games because different types of stories were being told in games. There's different technology being used in games, and there was a little bit more flexibility in terms of what I wanted to do. And like the indie market was different. And so started really leaning towards that. And so I graduated, worked within kind of the film industry for a little bit. I worked on a series of animated shorts that we used as commercials around the whole local area and the city, and got through that and was job hunting at the same time and couldn't find anything because the thing that I found is I didn't know enough about games. I had never opened a game engine. I didn't know how to do anything for games. I only knew how to do it for films. And it was similar enough that I was like, I could figure this out, but different enough that I was like, nobody believes I can figure this out. And I'm not entirely sure I know how to figure this out. And so at that time, it had been about 9 months since I had graduated, 9 or 10 months since I had graduated. I couldn't find anything else. The contract work had dried up at that point. And I was like, okay, something's got to change. And so at that point, I was freelancing and trying to find work and still applying to jobs and had put in hundreds of applications and had just gotten a few interviews. But every time I got to the interview process, I got blocked because it was like, I never opened a game engine. I didn't know how to work in a game engine. And there were so many people who had that it was like, okay, I'm not even competitive at this point. And so going back and forth, it kind of came down to the line of, okay, I can either spend a year or two trying to learn this on my own and figure it out, or I can get a master's. And I had been a TA in my undergrad and I knew I really liked teaching. And so for me at the time, teaching was a fallback. I was like, okay, if nothing works, I can go teach. Always. I was like, okay, if I have the master's, I'm in good shape there. And so I started researching master's programs. And the thing that I found is I was like, I want to go somewhere cool. I want to make sure I go somewhere that has good placement, because that was something in my undergrad that we didn't do internships. There was no placement. There was nothing career oriented. It was just at the end, it was like, good luck, adios, like, peace. And so the problem with that is that I had nothing to work off of. Like, I didn't even have a resume. I built that myself and tried to figure out a portfolio. And it was kind of ridiculous. And I didn't know anything. And so I was like, okay, I need a school that's going to prep me to go into the field. Not just one that's going to be like, here, you have the piece of paper. Like you're just in your little bubble and that's it. Exactly. I was like, I need something that I can pivot off of. And so I started looking at programs that were ranked, why they were ranked. I was looking for programs that had a track record of getting their graduates placements, that the people that were working at the school had been in industry or still were in industry, and so that it was a relevant course. And the one that I found was one in Scotland. It was at Abertay. And it was one of the top 10 in the world. And I was like, oh, and keep in mind, it's about July by this point. And so, well, maybe June. And so the thing is, semester starts in August. And I was like, okay, either I jump in and try to get in this semester after most deadlines have passed, or I wait till next year. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to get in this semester. It doesn't hurt me any at all. So I tried to apply to one in the States, couldn't get in. It was already closed.
Yeah.
And so the only one that was still open was the Scottish one. I was like, okay, Lord. And so put in the application there, and started prepping to move to a country I'd been to the country once, but not at all in the area. I'd never been to Dundee, never been to the city. I had no idea what it was like. And so, but still was trying to prep to move. So looking at like apartment listings online and trying to figure all of that out, looking at loans and all of that and gauging out my prices if I wanted to go there. Turned out it was for the cost of a year of a master's, because in Scotland, a master's is a year, that it was cheaper for me to go to Scotland for a year and get my master's than it was for me to stay in the US and do one semester of a 2-year master's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that included living, that included everything.
Wow.
So I was like, that one seems smarter. So I went that way. Tell my computer to be quiet. Sorry if that's picked up,
Want
but
some attention.
it does. So ended up getting accepted and moved on a week's notice, because I put in my visa application and all of those things before I even knew if I was accepted. And so ended up week's notice, moved to Scotland, to a city I'd never been in. And so it was kind of wild and weird and crazy. My mom went over with me and helped me pick an apartment. She was there for a week.
Oh,
and so we had a week to find an apartment and move in.
Oh my.
In a city I'd never been to. And it was ridiculous. And I had 2 bags of my stuff, and that was it, because we each had a checked bag. So that's how I moved to Scotland, was with 2 checked bags.
Crazy.
And we got there, found an apartment, and I moved in the morning before I had to take her to the airport. So I moved in, got all my stuff there, got settled. We spent one night in the apartment, then I took her to the airport.
Oh, that's stressful.
It was so stressful.
Now, do you drive on the different, like?
Yes.
Okay, did you have to do that?
No, because I just took buses.
Okay,
Because I was like, and it's all like stick shift, everything, and I drive an automatic. And I was like, I'm just gonna ride buses. It's gonna be great. So
but still,
transport is great.
Really, it wasn't confusing?
No.
Okay.
Well, okay. There was a couple times that we were on the tram and the doors closed and I was trying to get the bag, and so we had to circle around. And so there were incidents.
Yes.
There were incidents. But overall, their system works really well, because a lot of people don't drive.
Okay.
And so your buses connect to your trains, connect to the trams.
That's
and so
awesome.
it was really easy to get around, even to really remote parts of Scotland. You could get a train, walk a certain place, grab a bus to a place.
That's nice.
So it worked really well. And so sent my mom off, and then I spent basically 1.5 years in Scotland, because I stayed a little longer, and spent my time getting a master's degree in what's called professional practice. And got my master's degree in professional practice in video game design.
Okay.
And we worked in teams.
What is professional practice?
So it's basically a master's that isn't focused on the theory of it. It's getting you ready to walk into industry day and night. And so we were in the studio from 9 to 5 every day creating games.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And so we had an art team, we had programmers, we had designers, we had everything. And so we were making these games just from day one, go, go, go. And second semester, we ended up working for different companies. So like Rebellion Studios came to us with one of their representatives came to us. So we worked for the representative on a game for them. We worked with a couple of people who were from Riot. We worked all those, and they kind of oversaw these projects that we were working on, and we go back and forth, and they were our clients. As we go back and forth making these games, different teams had different ones, but there were 6 artists in a group of 52 students.
Wow.
And so the artists, we went everywhere. And so we just kind of scattered to different teams.
And you were an artist?
I was an artist.
Okay, what does an artist do?
So an artist does anything visual in the video game.
Okay.
So anything that's like the menus, we create the menus, we create the environments, the characters, the textures, all of it. Anything that's visual and pretty, we make. And then we hand it to the programmers and they make it work. But we work to a specification from the designer.
Okay.
And they've decided this is what this level is. These are the mechanics that we need. This is how the general layout is. And then we go and take their little boxy thing and we make like a bridge, and we make the buildings, and we make it look pretty, even though they had the block in. We now do the polish pass. We make it look pretty. And then we fight with the programmer on how many pixels we get and how many textures we get and all of that stuff until we get it to something that works. So we do the pretty pass.
Wow.
Rather than the mechanics or the programming, but they all have to integrate together. So you have teams just working constantly. Most of us artists were on 3 or 4 teams at a time. And so we would be bouncing between project to project to project, keeping track of all the assets we had to make, the textures we had to make, making sure they all fit together. And so we just kind of bounced all over the place, and we're on as many teams as we could be. And then we got to graduation. And so everything went smoothly for me. Everything went well. I loved it. Spent a lot of time there. I think I came back for like 2 weeks over Christmas, got sick. And so I was in bed the 2 weeks and then went back to Scotland. So I was over there almost the entire time.
Wow.
And it was kind of weird, 7-hour time difference. So it was like anytime anything went wrong, it was like, I cannot call anyone.
Oh,
This is on me. And so I learned a lot really rapidly.
you have to be independent very fast.
Yes, very, very quickly. Even stuff like the first time I went to the grocery store and like I was trying to buy food and I didn't know what any of the money in my hand was. The bills were easy, but all the coins, I just remember standing there with the cashier lady and just being like, I'm American. I don't know the coins. Please help. And she just laughed and explained each coin and was like, this is this one. No, you don't need that one. Here's your change. Okay, now you're good. Now breathe. It's okay.
Yeah.
Very kind people. And so made it through. Ended up with a very strong Scottish accent by the end.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Really?
Very strong. And it faded just because I was surrounded by it constantly. And it was thick accents. I was the only American in the entire program. And so there was no one else that spoke like me, talked like me, anything. Even my spelling is still now messed up because I wrote papers and I'd get counted off if I spelled things the American way. So I trained myself to spell things the British way. And then I was just surrounded all the time by people speaking with a very thick Scottish accent. And so I picked it up.
Did your family catch on to that?
Oh, yes, 100%.
Did they make fun of you?
100%. All the time. All the time. They still make fun of me when I spell a color with a U.
Oh.
They're like, why does it have a U? And I'm like, leave me alone. So still happens. There's still words that I'll say that have a Scottish lilt to them, but I had a very strong one. And then I came back to the States because I had wanted to stay over in the UK and I'd wanted to work in the UK, but Brexit happened right as I was over there. So the whole thing was that basically the UK left the EU. And the problem was that changed all of their laws for how they dealt with visas and people from different countries. It was only supposed to affect people from the EU, but nobody was sure if the UK was just going to change all of their rules. So no studio, no company wanted to touch anybody who was not a UK citizen. And so it was like, we'd love to hire you, but we're not touching anybody that we have to deal with visas with because we don't know what the laws are going to be. And it's very expensive to sponsor someone's visa. And so they were like, it's not worth the risk. And so I spent months looking and just couldn't get hired anywhere. Simply
you still were looking in the UK?
Yes. Yes, because that was my first choice. I loved Scotland. I loved going to castles. I would go to remote areas on the weekends because halfway across the country was an 1.5-hour train ride. And you were halfway across the country in the Highlands going hiking.
Yeah, that's
great. And so that was great to spend those weekends there. They were really good about, the Scots are very good about keeping your work life. So 9 to 5 and then you're done. You walk away, you leave it alone. So I had a lot of time on the weekends and a lot of restructuring for me because my undergrad was not like that. And so I had to retrain myself, and I still am, to be like, to have a life and to not just do work constantly. But so ended up coming back to the States, and I was looking while I was in Scotland, did some applications. I wanted to be a 3D artist of some sort. Initially, I started out the master's wanting to do concept art. But got all the way through, did portfolios for concept art, got feedback from industry professionals, but got to the point sitting down both with industry professionals and with my professors that it was like, you're not good enough to do this. If you want to spend the next 3 to 5 years working on it nonstop, 100%, you could be good enough to do this. But you would have to spend that time first before you could even get a foot in the door.
Now, what is concept art?
So concept art is the beginning stages of art. Before anything is built in 3D, before any lights are put in, before anything is made, you do what's called concept art. And it's just 2D drawing of whatever it is, of worlds, of characters, environments, everything. Everything gets concept art to try, because it's much cheaper to draw it than it is to build it in 3D and bring it and all of that. And they go, no, we don't like this. So concept art is that idea phase of getting everybody on the same page. And so you do bunches of concepts to try to see, okay, where are we going? And then usually the producer or the lead or the art lead, etc., will start picking out the best concepts, and then you meld them together into the look of the world. I have a bunch of books of concept art, which is wonderful. Cool. So, and it's that whole process, but it's one of the most competitive in the industry. It's really hard to get into.
I guess you have to be a really amazing artist.
Exactly, because it's one of the most fun as well. And so everyone wants to be in that field. And so that was the problem that I was running into. And for me, I had already taken the year to go to the master's and worked outside. And I knew I was like, I don't have time spend 3 to 5 years. And honestly, there are other elements that I love. I love working in 3D. I love doing environment art. I love all of the building process. So I'm okay walking away from environment art or concept art and just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
So for me, I made that choice and I pivoted over to 3D modeling and doing textures and world building and all of that instead. And so graduating, I was looking for jobs in that field. And at the time, to support life, I was also working for a company that I would do 3D pieces, and they would then take and 3D print them to make like urns and memorials and stuff like that. So I was doing that freelance at the same time as my master's. And then when I was coming back to the States, there was one job I applied for while I was in Scotland, because I was applying to a bunch of studios and everywhere just to see where I could get in. And there was one job that I saw that was for a 3D modeler, specifically an environment artist, to work for the Secret Service. And I was like, what the heck? I'll just apply. You know, I was sending out 5 to 10 applications a day. So I was like, okay, I'll rewrite my cover letter, change this up, do a portfolio, make sure everything's right, and just send it off. We'll see what happens. Nothing's gonna happen from this. Sent it off and got back to the States, was doing a bunch of other interviews, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. One of them was modeling airplane parts. And I was doing that and I was like, I could do this, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I want to build worlds, I want to build environments. And I got an email from the Secret Service that they wanted to interview me. And I was like, what? And so I walked into that interview, went through the whole process, and ended up taking a job with them in DC. And so it was wild, it was weird. There was all sorts of like security briefings and security, like I had to go through background checks and I had to get fingerprinted and I had to do all of this, send a whole list of any international contacts I had. I had spent a year and a half abroad.
So you had a long list.
So I had a huge list and I had to give names, information, phone numbers, addresses, all of it.
Oh my.
One of my friends in Scotland actually had to go in to London and be interviewed by a Secret Service agent who was in London. And so it was a whole process of making sure that I wasn't a terrorist or that I wasn't a spy or that I wasn't anything like that.
Oh man, that would weed a lot of people out too, I would think.
Yes, it does really rapidly. They go through financials, they go through all sorts of stuff to basically make sure you could never be blackmailed. And they interview friends, they interview people who are close to you, they interview family to see what other people's opinions are of you. So it's wild. So it's a whole process. And that took, oh gosh, I think it took like 8 or 9 months to get my security clearance, even on a preliminary basis.
Wow.
And so I was just waiting to start work until that time, because they have to do all of that before I can walk in the door.
Do they pay you while you're waiting?
They do not.
So they're basically like, if you can wait 8 or 9 months, we have a job for you.
Exactly. Exactly. And so for some people who are already working somewhere else, it's great.
Yeah.
So you have time to prep, you have time to do all that. For me, I was like, hi, Mom. Can I live here for a while? She was great. My family was very good. My mom and dad were great about letting me stay with them while all of that was panning out. But it was stressful because it was like always waiting, because anytime in that process, they could say no. And then I'm back at square one with everybody else. So it's like, what do you put on hold? What do you juggle? And so it was a weird time. But it ended up coming through, went to Secret Service, and I was in DC ended up only being about a year and a half. But I got to DC in August of 2019 and started work and did travel, did all sorts of stuff, and was building 3D environments basically of places where events would be happening. And so we use that to train agents and use video game technology so they can walk through these spaces without actually having to bus them there. So all the spaces that we built use LiDAR data, use pictures, all of this to make it true to life. And it was accurate down to the millimeter. And so we were building real world spaces in 3D environments and doing it very rapidly with a very small team. And so we were rolling through it very, very quickly. We had to travel, go all sorts of places, built a lot of models. There's some things I can talk about, some things I can't. And so there was a lot of process that went on there. And then the pandemic hit and DC completely locked down. And even further than that, Secret Service gave direction that we were not to use public transport at all, even personal, like you couldn't even personal travel on public transport. So basically for me, I didn't have a car in DC. So that limited me to about a 1 mile walking radius of anywhere that I could go in my tiny apartment. My apartment was 450 square feet. And so I had my apartment and then wherever I could have a 6-foot bubble around me. Thankfully, I was right across from the National Cathedral. So there was all the cathedral grounds that were gorgeous. And so I'd go over there and walk around and just try to stay sane. The whole city was shut down. And so finally I got permission from my bosses, and then I had to be transferred to a field office so that I could go back to New Mexico. and help out my parents and make sure everybody was okay at home.
Yeah.
And that way I wasn't just sitting in a 450 square foot apartment with my dog by myself. Cause this was June, I think, by the time I was able to leave, because it had to go through this whole chain of command. Ended up going back to New Mexico. Long story short, at that time, there was so much going on in DC, so much workload. I was working 60 to 70-hour days, doing overtime and just trying to get everything in because it was convention season. So we had the Democratic National Convention, Republican National Convention. We were working on all these projects. That ended and we had more projects come on in.
Yeah.
So it was just constant overtime, constant sprint. And I was burning out really fast. And so I knew that I needed to pivot. And one of the things that I remembered loving was teaching, because I was looking at the games industry and it's a great industry and I loved it, but I was like, I need something slower. I need to breathe and recover from this a little bit. And so that's what made my shift to HCU and to teaching and everything, was just realizing, okay, I need to step back and breathe a little bit. I love teaching. I love working with other people and getting things pieced together and helping people understand and build their own projects. I love being that support system. So that's what brought teaching. So it kind of like ended up, I thought I was going left and I ended up going left, right, up, down, sideways, and just ended up here.
Doesn't matter how much you plan, you're always gonna be
Exactly.
surprised.
And I think that was the biggest thing for me, is I had to learn to be okay with pivoting.
Mm.
And I'm really glad I was, because otherwise I would still be sitting in probably my childhood bedroom trying to figure out, how do I make
Yeah.
my visual, film animation thing work for games without pivoting. And so I had to be able to sidestep and
Be
pivot and try
flexible.
things different.
So what do you teach? What do you teach here? And like, what would students be learning like under you or under the program here?
Gotcha. So I'm kind of the video game side. I'm also, I coordinate graphic design and I coordinate kind of the visual side of our digital media programs. So, but anything video game design, so like the 3D modeling class, so that's the 3D design class, that's learning 3D modeling, texturing, lighting, those basics. And then I'm running a 3D texturing class, which is how do you do that in 3D? How do you paint on a model? How do you get that looking realistic, getting the materials looking right, all of that. So everything that you need for 3D modeling, environment art, all of that is in kind of those two classes. I teach some of the 2D design where I'm teaching Illustrator and Photoshop and introducing those. Storytelling classes, I do the storytelling in digital media where we focus on, okay, how does storytelling work in branding, in video games, in animation, and how does that come together? And then, I do a lot of the art classes and the drawing classes for digital. So.
Okay. A lot of the students in media and careers are kind of frustrated because, I'm coming at them with more of a writing or film side and I don't know the other stuff. And they're like, they'll ask me questions about what I assume is probably your field, but I'm like, I don't know. So they're like, a lot of them are like, oh, I'm feeling lost, or I don't know what to do. I want to go into video games. I want to go into design. I want to go into something that's not film and writing. What advice do you have for them? Like, what should they do? How should they start about the process?
Ooh, okay. So one of the key things is that even when you're first beginning, try to understand what it is you want to do. Because if you're wanting to be a graphic designer, that's going to be a very different path than if you're wanting to be a video game designer. If you want to be a video game designer, that's going to be very different than if you want to be a video games artist. So look at your field enough that you can understand, okay, what are the specialties within that field? And one of the ways you can look at those fields is to go and look at job listings now and figure out, like, if you want to be a video games artist, go and look that up, see what's required there. And then you can start piecing that out. Look at other people's portfolios, not other student portfolios. That's not overly helpful. Sometimes it is, but overall you want to look at industry portfolios and see, okay, what are people learning? What are people showing off that they know how to do? Because that's going to tell you what's in demand in the industry. And if you can talk to people in your field, once you've narrowed that down and understand what it is you like to do, then you can start reaching out to people and asking them, okay, what do I need? What would you recommend? What would you tell yourself 5 years ago? What would you tell yourself when you were breaking into the industry? Where do you think things are going to go? What do you recommend a new artist has or doesn't have? What should I focus on? What should I not? So knowing all of that information would be stuff you can do outside of classes. But then knowing which field you want to be in, look at the classes that are offered each semester and see, okay, what can I start in early to start learning as much as you can, and then do personal projects outside of that. The more work you do in any of those programs, in any of those industries, the more familiar you'll be with it, the more you'll learn from it, get feedback, get critique, take that critique to heart and really work with it. Don't get defensive of your work, because you have to take critique to get better. And if you take every critique as a personal attack, you're never going to get better.
Yeah.
You have to be able to separate yourself from your work and be able to look at that objectively. Because then you're going to be able to tell, okay, what critique is relevant and what critique isn't. And then if you can step back from your work, you can see that. If you can't step back from your work, you'll never be able to see that.
Okay. What is the biggest like misconception that students have early on about either like their field or the industry or what they're doing in this program?
Cool. Okay. So there's a couple. One of them is that I love playing video games, so therefore I'm going to be good at making them.
Okay.
They're two very different things. Just like you can love watching sports and not know how to play. You're not the player on the field just because you know how to be in the stands.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to love the industry that you're going to go into. But you need to realize that those same topics are not going to translate the way that you think they are. So just because you're good at video games or you like video games does not mean you're going to automatically be good at them or that you're going to enjoy making them. And that's okay. So getting into those intro classes helps you realize, oh, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, which kind of ties into the second misconception, which is I'm going to go and be a video games artist, designer, programmer, etc. because I get to play video games all day. No, you don't. Most of the time, you're going to be test running things, running into errors and going and fixing them. There's very little of the playing involved in it, unless you're a play tester. Even then, you're not playing it for fun. You're playing it to try to break it. And you're going to walk into the same wall 1,700 times to try to make sure nobody else can get through that wall. It's not playing the game. And so realizing that just like watching movies doesn't make you good at making movies, reading doesn't make you good at writing necessarily, there's a skill set in and of itself that's there. That's true of graphic design as well. Even just because you can draw doesn't mean you're going to instantly be good at doing it digitally. There's a whole tool set that you have to learn. There's always going to be a learning curve. If you can stick with it, you're going to do really good. But you have to have the grit to stick with it and get through the hard part to be able to see the good results. You have to be an amateur before you can be a professional. So don't feel bad for being an amateur is the biggest thing that I would say.
Okay. And then I was going to ask, what kind of personality types or even just traits tend to be more successful in these fields?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's a tricky one because I've seen lots of different personality types work really, really well.
Okay.
I've seen people who are very like type A and very like in charge and very like go forth and like conquer the world, do extremely well. I've also seen people who are really shy and really quiet do extremely well. The main thing that matters is that you can work with other people, because especially in games, especially in graphic design, especially in these fields, you're going to work with a team. None of those fields exists alone in a vacuum. And so if you can't work with a team, it's not going to matter how much I can teach you. I'm not going to want to hire you. Nobody's going to want to work with you. And that's more important, because do your foundations, make sure you understand what you're doing and do it well, because it is a competitive industry. But personality wise, you need to be able to work with people and you need to be able to learn, and you need to be able to let your idea die for a better idea, because there is back and forth and there is that trade. You can't be so attached to something that you'll fight to the death for it when there's something better on the field. And sometimes you have to be like, okay, we're going to pivot because this is the way the team is going to go. So you have to be flexible.
Did you, oh, hold on, I want to make sure the time, well, it doesn't say the time, so I guess we're good. Was there a time in which you were less collaborative and you had to learn that?
So for me, I always did pretty well at working with people just because I always had been taught to do that. But there's definitely times that an idea is the one that goes forward with. And even if mine wasn't ever in the running, maybe there's an idea that I like better, but that's not the one that's picked. And so it's one of those that it's like, oh man, okay, I got to work on this anyway, because it's not for me in the end. Because if you're working in the industry, and even if you're working as an indie artist or whatever it is, it's no longer yourself you're working for. You're working for your audience, you're working for your team, you're working for all of that. So you have to set that aside. And sometimes your pride does get hurt, because not everybody you're working with is good at working with people. And so there's sometimes somebody says something and you're like, that was just mean.
Yeah.
And that was uncalled for. But you have to just roll with it. And so it's hard to get your pride or your feelings out of the way, whichever it ends up being. But there's been some times that yes, but overall collaboration, not as much, just because I always kind of was collaborating just by nature.
So what about, so a lot of my freshmen are scared of the collaborative process, no matter what, like what field. They're like, I want to do things my own. People are going to steal my story. They're going to steal my ideas. They're going to like I don't know, there's this fear of other people, and this need to be in control, which I think is just because once you actually learn how to do things, you don't need that control as much. But I don't know. But for people who are not natural at that, do you have any practical tips to help them become better collaborators?
One of the big things, take a deep breath. Like when you're walking in and you're collaborating with people, everybody's nervous, especially if it's a new team. You're waiting to see the dynamics of it. Take a deep breath before you react. And also try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Like if somebody says something you don't like the tone, take a step back before you take issue with it and make sure that you're being fair, and also make sure that you're giving them far beyond the benefit of the doubt. It's far better to be kind than it is to be right. And that's kind of the biggest thing, is like when you're collaborating, your story might change. Your story might be different, but it's probably going to be better. Because when it's only in your hands, it's limited to your skills, your knowledge, your ability. But when you have 10 people who are good at what they do coming in and working, and you're allowing them to work in their specialties, all of those specialties are going to pour in and create something richer and better than what you could do on your own. Collaboration is not the death of an idea. It's not the death of creativity. It actually opens it up and lets it breathe. So remember to come at it with the right attitude. You can walk in the door with a good attitude. That's also going to affect the people around you. You can't change their mind. You can't change their attitude, but you can adjust yours. And so if you're afraid of collaborating, or you're not used to it, or you're tense, or you don't like it, do it more. Do it more and more and more and more, and get used to it, because that is this industry. If you want to just be solo, you are not going to make it. It is not going to work. There are people who have made games on their own, but usually they're not as strong, or usually they don't reach as wide of an audience, etc. So it is possible, but don't tempt fate.
Yeah.
Don't go on that path because you refuse to learn to work with other people. You're always going to have to work with other people in some capacity. Learn to do it well, and your life is going to be much less stressful instead of continuing to dance around it. So work with people more, not less.
Okay. And then getting toward the end, unless this just starts, I hope it's still recording. It's recording. Okay,
Cool.
I'm having them write personal bios about how they, basically telling their story and why they're in the field that they're in the field, and why they should pursue that. And the reason I go about that is because in film and in screenwriting, you're not really getting interviewed. If you're getting interviewed, they already like your work. They just want to see if they like you. Is that the same with your field?
Yes,
Okay.
100%. So most of the time, what's getting you the interview is your portfolio. And you don't really get to stand there and present your portfolio to people like you used to. And there's occasions where you do, but most of the time they're seeing your portfolio without any context of you standing there and telling them it. And so, yeah, if you have the interview, they already like what you're doing. They're just checking to make sure that they don't hate you. And so, yes, the bios are really, really helpful, because you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. There's a lot of people that went into this field, a lot. And so that is not said to discourage you and be like, too bad you can't get in. You can, but just know that there is a lot of competition out there. So you need to understand, why are you wanting to be here? Because if it's just, I don't know, because it looked fun and it looked like an easy degree, that's not going to get you very far. Also, you're going to be very unpleasantly surprised when you're introduced to Maya. But
that goes hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And if you know what you're doing and why, then you can present that to people in the best way. And then they have an idea of you already, which puts you a step ahead of the people that they only see their work. If they see your work and an idea of who you are and what you're doing, they're already getting to know you. And that's really important, because yeah, your interview is just, do we like you? Are you as good as we think you are? Or did you just like steal all that off the interview somewhere or off the internet somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one knows the person.
Yes.
Okay. And then is there any other stuff that you feel like you should say?
Okay. This one just comes to mind. Don't lie in an interview. Don't lie on your resume. Don't lie on your cover letter, because in the end that might get you in the door, but it's going to be found out eventually.
And also get you out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll get you right out of it. And it's a small industry. And that's something to keep in mind, both in terms of don't lie in your interview, etc., but also be aware of how you interact with everyone, including your peers now. Because there are some people that I look at back in college and I see a job come out and I know that they have the skill set to do it, but I would never recommend them for that job. because I've worked with them and I will never work with them again. And
Yeah.
I will not recommend that anybody works with them
Mhm.
because I know their attitude, I know their personality, and I know they don't play well with others.
Yeah.
And so even though they might have the technical skills, they'll never have my recommendation. And that's years ago. And so keep that in mind, is that the people around you are also your network. Treat them well. Don't just suck up to them. Treat them well. And treat them kindly and treat them honestly. Don't just act as if these people are your stepping stones.
Yeah.
You need them and they need you. Great friendships, because that's the strongest network that you can have.
Yeah.
And then you build out from there.
And I imagine it's the same in your field too, where it's like, oh, one day I'm gonna get connected with a big, big whatever, and they're gonna help me out. And it's like, no, the people are gonna help you out are the people right next to you.
Yes, because the big names in the end, yeah, they might have some pull. Like I've spoken to some of the big names, but the people that they're putting forward is also the people that they know,
Yeah.
the people that they have worked with, that they've enjoyed working with. So there isn't any shortcuts in this industry. I know we always say the thing, it's about who you know, but who you know is not the name at the top of the pile. It's the names that you're working alongside. Because even if you know the person at the top of the pile and they give you a recommendation, if you can't do the work, if you can't work with the team, it won't matter whose recommendation you have.
Exactly.
You'll have one job and that's it. So yeah, it's the people who are right next to you that are going to help you get into the industry, and you help them get in as well. Because there's now some people that I'm like, oh yeah, I know an artist. You need an artist? Here you go. You need a programmer? Here you go. Even though it's a job that maybe I can't fit or that I wouldn't want to fit, but I know someone who does, I can recommend them for it. And that means a lot. Even if it's somebody that has never asked me for that. But I know, hey, if you need an artist, grab Lily. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Do your homework.
Your homework.
Yeah.
It starts here. It starts
here. It starts early. Well, okay, here's one thing. I know I said that jokingly, but manage your time well. Both in terms of paying attention to when things are due and doing your best work and doing all of that, but also make sure you schedule in time for you to rest and for you to recover and for you to breathe. Otherwise, your work's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse as you burn out. And so make sure you protect time for yourself to breathe, even if it's 5 minutes to go on a walk. Make sure you set that time aside.
How do you know if you're burning out?
You feel it.
Known it.
So when you're burning out, it's hard to explain because I'm a feeling person, but you definitely feel it. It's like, for me, I get exhausted, I get grumpy, nothing's good enough. I know I'm making mistakes and I'm trying to push through, and I can tell like my temper's shorter. All my work is suffering and I'm hating everything that I'm doing, and anything that I'm doing, no matter how good it is, feels like trash. Some of that's final stress, but if you are burning out, you'll notice that you start hating what you love. And so you have to learn to reset and make sure that you're loving the process, not just the end result, because the end result lasts for that long. The process lasts so much longer, but also making sure that you're stepping back, going for a 10-minute walk and coming back at it with a fresh mind. Because if you're stuck in the same cycle and you're just repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating, you need to step away from it because you're probably making the same mistakes over and over and over and over again that then you'll have to go and fix later. It saves you so much more time to take 10 minutes and breathe than it will to just push through those 10 minutes.
So breathe.
Breathing is good.
Breathe and eat. Like
And
you
eat.
always say in Faith in the Arts.
Breathe, eat, sleep.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I had a terrible day, and then I realized I just haven't eaten.
Yeah, hey, Elijah did it too, where Elijah was just like, I'm so depressed, I want to die. And God was like, okay, drink something, eat something, sleep, feel better, we feel better. Okay. He was much less condescending about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, just here's an angel. Take care of him.
Here we go.
Okay. Well,
that's what I got.
Thank you, Sarah.
I tried.
One of the favorite HCU profs.
Oh no, now that's on recording, I'm gonna be getting in trouble.
Getting in trouble? Oh my God.
Because I can't agree or disagree with that because I'm in trouble either way.
She's gonna be neutral. I'll just agree.
Yeah, I'll be Switzerland.
Schmanks.